Well, Lisa, it's so wonderful to meet you in person. I feel like I know you. Just
Same.
through your stories and through your conversations, you have had such a huge impact on us, on our work in the world of neuroscience in general, just because of the beautiful and eloquent way that you describe very difficult situations. And I love how you weave pain with hope and compassion in your stories. It's so wonderful to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk to both of you. I'm a huge fan of all of the information that you put out in such an accurate and compassionate way. So I've been cheering you on for a while now, and I'm excited to know you better.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Yeah, so as I was saying with Aisha and even the kids last night, one of the most important things people can do is communicate human experience with others in a way that connects to a larger denominator, as many people as possible.
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole point of what's art is to give experiences beyond the immediate, bring complexity into reality, and especially in the age of AI, which it seems to be the common conversation everywhere, especially in our household, because both of our kids are going to technology and AI. Literally, if there's any value in humanity, it's that ability. And again, not to give you a fulsome flattery, I've said this many, it's the thing that you do, which is the most important thing that people can do, which is do just that, communicate that human experience, that emotion. And we see this on a daily basis for the last 19 years, since, in fact, on the 29th of this year will be our 19th anniversary. Mm-hmm. The first conversation we had 20 years ago was around this experience that Aisha experienced with her grandfather, seeing this behemoth of a human being just wither away and lose parts of himself. Same thing with my grandfather. And you've done this repeatedly. What brought you to this journey? What was the first night? Is the first thing that got you into this journey of translating emotions?
It was my grandmother. So my grandmother was a brilliant, amazing woman, very independent, capable of anything, and she got Alzheimer's. And I was in my late 20s. I'm from a big Italian family, and she had 9 children, so I was not one of her caregivers. That fell to the generation before me. But I was around, and I loved her very much, and I witnessed this disease sort of disassemble her. And it was really heartbreaking and hard and frustrating and confusing. And but I'm the neuroscientist in my family, so I did my homework. I'm like, well, I can research this and understand this disease better and pass that education along to my family so we can better take care of her. And I learned a lot of information, and I learned a lot that was helpful, some that wasn't helpful to them because I really geeked out on the neuroscience of it all. So I learned everything about the molecular neurobiology of Alzheimer's to the extent that we understand it. I learned about the clinical management of the disease, and I learned about caregiving. And I found that everything was written by the point of view of an outsider. So it was a clinician, a scientist, a caregiver, a social worker. So there were all these views from the outside looking in. And I recognized that what was lacking for me, as I was 28 years old at the time, was empathy. So I had tons of sympathy. I felt so bad for her. I felt so bad for us, right? All of those feelings I had were based on sympathy. There was a distance between us, right? So there's my grandmother who has Alzheimer's, and she's so different than I am. I couldn't really fathom what it was like to be her because I was kind of too afraid to be still with it and be with her in it. So I was feeling so much sympathy for her. So there's all that emotional distance. That's how we otherize, right? Yeah. Sympathy and pity, that's, oh, you're different, you're othered. But empathy is the ability to feel with her and imagine what it's like to be her. That collapses the emotional distance, and we see how we can share a human experience. Even if I don't have Alzheimer's, I can imagine what it's like to be her. Well, I didn't know how to do that then. But the aha moment for me was, oh, fiction is a place where you can explore empathy. Story is the place where humans have the ability to walk in someone else's shoes. And so I thought, well, someday I'd like to write a novel about a woman living with Alzheimer's, tell it from the very beginning, all of those moments and stages that we missed as a family because we were in denial or we had the false information of, forgetting is a normal part of normal aging. My grandmother hiding it because she was so proud and independent. So seeing it from the very beginning and told from the perspective of the person with it.
Beautiful.
So that was
Oh my gosh.
So beautiful.
And the way you describe and differentiate between empathy and sympathy is so critical. We just did a podcast on epilepsy, specifically Dostoevsky, and how his experience, of course, it's in first person in himself, but he tried to humanize his experience through all his characters, right? The struggles that he experienced with epilepsy, he actually then brought into characters, and that you're right, fiction can open up everybody to the other, becomes themselves in a way. That's such a beautiful concept. And the science behind it, how did you, that's the hard part.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
How do you
Weave in
the science?
Well, for me, that was the easy part because I'm a neuroscientist.
Yes.
Becoming a novelist was like, how do I do that? And was scary. But the neuroscience was, that part was home for me. So in doing the research, I started in the science and the clinical. So I interviewed neuroscientists like Rudy Tanzi. I'm from Boston, and I got my degree from Harvard, did all my training at Mass General Hospital. So that's my neighborhood and my playground. So I talked to Rudy. I talked to Aliatri at Mass General. I shadowed him. I sat in on neuropsych testing. I interviewed genetic counselors, general practice physicians. And then the best piece of research I did is I came to know 27 people living with early stage and or early onset Alzheimer's who could still communicate what it feels like to live with it. And I was in touch with these folks pretty much every day for the year and a half that I was writing this book. So the experts were, the people on the outside and then the people on the inside. And then all the reading, of course, too. I did all the reading. But I tell anyone who's a writer, especially fiction, it's like, this is not a Google search. This is not just reading the textbooks. You need to go and find the people who live and breathe this. That's where the gold is.
Yeah,
Sure.
beautiful. And I think that's why it resonated so much with us neurologists, because we deal with it in the clinic. We see the human side of it as well. But the way you've depicted it in a story format where people who don't belong to those worlds, they get a beautiful, complete picture of what a person goes through when they have dementia.
Yeah, and I think you just touched on something that's like one of the gems of story is that it gives people who have the condition or the disease a chance to be seen and heard, right? So people who have Alzheimer's, if they read Still Alice, they say, that's me, that's how it feels, that's what I live. There's so much healing that can be done. If we can't cure a disease, that's one thing, but can there be healing in the sense that you don't feel so isolated and alienated, right? That we can reduce some of the shame and stigma and secrecy around this just by showing this is what it feels like on the page. And then for people who have no experience with Alzheimer's, those folks they're definitely not going to pick up the Journal of Neuroscience.
No.
They're probably not even going to pick up a nonfiction memoir or not some nonfiction book about the disease. They're not going to pick up the 36-hour day because it's not part of their lived experience yet. It's not on their radars. But they might pick up a novel. So this is how we can reach people beyond the folks who are affected today and get a sense of everybody caring about this, as many people as possible. So it reaches beyond the community of just Alzheimer's.
For our audience who are listening, The 36-Hour Day is a beautiful book for caregivers to understand the complexity of living with someone who is experiencing cognitive impairment and dementia. In many ways, Lisa, your work has inspired me to always remind my patients and their family members, because the patient usually doesn't come alone in the clinic. It's usually one loved one or a family. And Dean actually invites everybody from their family members to come over. We all know that Dean is in active session when all the chairs from the other rooms are stolen and taken to his room. Because when you go in there, there's like 8 people.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Your work has inspired me to always remind people that it's critical to separate the person from the disease, right? We always start defining someone with dementia, like a demented person, a patient with Alzheimer's disease. No, this is a person. This is Mary who is experiencing this condition. And it's very important for family members in the community to remember him as Mary, as a very complex person who did phenomenal things in her life, who had incredible, situations and stories in her life. It's difficult to do that when you have 20 minutes to see someone every 3 months, but it's almost like forcing yourself to think that way. And that changes your management. It changes the words that you use. It changes the words that the family members use with their loved ones as well. So it's really, really important and thank you for bringing the human side to this devastating disease.
Yeah, words matter.
Yeah.
It frames how we think about our worthiness, our identity. I found that to be true of everyone I spoke to with Alzheimer's, this sense of who am I now and how do I matter with this in a world that tends to be very, if you've got anything going on from the neck up, there's a very special taboo that goes along with that. Like there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding that goes with anything going on from the neck up. So people tend to get really uncomfortable around you and look away. And so it can be very lonely. It can be very, how do I stay connected to the life I used to have? How do I create a life and a new relationship now? Who am I? That's the biggest question. A lot of people ask, like, who am I now that I have this? And so having doctors who recognize the human in you that's still here. That's why I called the book Still Alice.
Yes.
She's still here. She's still worthy of being and connecting. And even if she can't remember this conversation a half an hour from now, it doesn't mean that conversation didn't matter both to her and the other people in it.
Yeah,
This is beautiful. And one of the reasons that we bring the family members in, I think it's the most important thing we do. I mean, giving people Aricept and Namenda and all of that is fine, but it's not it's not even much of a treatment, but it's useful where it is. Where it matters is that preparing the family for that journey so that enough people know the journey, enough people know that the person is still going to be there no matter what phase they're in, or no matter how much is forgotten, they're still there. Literally, it's the most important thing I've read in a long time is your books, which is giving humanity its due, and the families to be prepared in that journey where you're feeling uncomfortable. That sense of dissonance, the sense of dissonance subconsciously pushes you away in many, many different ways. Not in a non-caring way, but at the end of the day, it becomes dispassionate. It becomes disconnected, whatever the reason may be, whatever the mechanism may be. Just having greater awareness, greater points of contact along the family allows that stillness that you brought, that allows that connectedness, allows that connective tissue that makes a family maintain that person longer and more there. And it's the most important thing I think we do in a clinic. Ironically, it seems like a conversation session, but it must be that because it can't be just a disease. And you can't believe how many people I've recommended, family members, I've recommended your books to them. It's almost like every one of the thousands that we've met. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you. Oh, that's so cool to know.
Awesome. I guess at this point, I would love to know, and I'm always curious about how you come up with, this persona in your story. Like, how does it come to you? I know that you have this incredible background of being connected both in the academic world, and you're such a beautiful storyteller. But when you're creating a character, what is the process for you to keep that authenticity?
So So I'm always looking to tell the truth under the imagined circumstances. So I've done all of this research, especially with the folks who live with the disease or the condition or the disorder. And so I sort of know sort of the common threads of truth, the common threads of human experience that can happen if someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So now I've got to create a character. And it's interesting. I've never taken a writing class, but I did very serendipitously train as an actress while I was writing Still Alice. Like I'd always wanted to learn how to act. And now that I was a neuroscientist writing a novel, I figured there were no rules for me anymore. So I would also do some acting. And I found that the principles of acting apply so beautifully to writing. And so things like you're always raising the stakes as high as possible whenever possible. What do people want from each other? Who's getting it? Who's not? And how are people changed by what happens? So those are some of the big ones. And so thinking about, what makes a good story and sort of all of those rules of craft, I made Alice a Harvard professor because I'm raising the stakes as high as possible now, right? Because he or she's going to be diagnosed with a disease that robs her of her ability to think and remember, right? She's going to have dementia. And if she's placed all of her worth and identity in being able to think and remember at a very, very high level, that's really going to force her to wrestle with the questions of who am I now and how can I matter if I can't be that Harvard professor anymore. I also wanted to give her a relationship that got closer because of her diagnosis and one where it pulled apart. I'm never trying to, while I always believe in telling my stories with lots of hope, because I think that there is hope in every story I hear. Even when I was writing about ALS, it's about, people don't live the tragedy of their diagnosis 24/7. There are the stages of grief, and I would paint that in for all of the characters. So everybody, the person who is diagnosed and their family, all those people in your room, Dean, that come in, they're all going through the loss of the person and the relationship that they had. But they don't all go through it at the same time on the same days. So you have anger, denial, bargaining, despair, acceptance, but mom might be in acceptance and dad's still in denial, and one of the sons is in anger and the daughter is in, right? And so you get all these people in the same room, and what do we do about mom who has Alzheimer's, and everybody's in a very different emotional place. So I knew that was going to play a role in the story. And so honestly, I don't outline my books. It's kind of like a very spiritual way of writing. Julia Cameron has a book called The Artist's Way that I love, and I've read maybe 4 times. It's really about being present. So getting in the seat and say, okay, here I am on chapter, I had the book I'm writing now, I think I'm on chapter 32, and just being there. What are the sensory moment to moment details? What is she feeling? What does she want? What does she need? What happens if she doesn't get it? So everybody's the hero of their own life story. So it's just really getting into that empathy, feeling what she's feeling. And then for all of my characters, so like with John and Still Alice, I'm telling this story from Alice's point of view. And so at one point I was really losing track of John. I was like, he'd show up in a scene and I don't really know how he would react here. So I actually, while I wrote that book, I kept a separate journal for John that kept track of what he was feeling and what he wanted and what he was confused and heartbroken over, and it was very hard for him to make the decisions that Alice wanted him to make, that he could and couldn't make. So yeah, it's all about sort of getting inside those characters, inhabiting them as human beings, and sort of feeling what they feel and knowing what they want.
So I'm going to go on a little tangent, but it's interesting to me. So I think that acting, you brought up acting, and I've been talking about acting with the kids, and I think it's such an incredible art. I mean, good acting. We've seen bad acting. That's just everything. Yeah. True. I mean, we just saw this Marvel movie with the Thor.
Love and Thunder or something?
No, this latest one. So there's a bunch of characters in that movie playing whatever. I'm not going to impugn anybody, but there's one character, and it's what's his name, the actor.
I have to Google.
Yeah, it's an amazing actor. He doesn't care what kind of movie it is, if it's going to be a bomb, and his journey it's so indelible. It's Christian Bale.
Yeah, Christian
it's
Bale.
Like you're looking at everybody else doing whatever, and then there's this incredible piece of psychotherapy in the middle of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Which is bewildering. If any, I think
It's like, all the other characters are, sorry, no disrespect, lollipops, but like Christian Bale is tiramisu, He's just like...
Of course, she had to bring the food, but
I relate. Yeah.
That's a perfect analogy, but it's so the psychotherapy part of it. It's the self-analysis. It's the bringing out as much to the surface, and it's flowering, and a lot of times you don't know how much is going to flower. So I love the act of acting. I think if I was in another life, I would have some kind of character acting. Yeah, right. No, I can barely play the guitar, let alone act. Or any artistic things. But the reality is, it's such a beautiful thing. And writing, to me, great writing. There's writing where you just regurgitate the superficial thing that just comes out. But great writing, and I'm not giving you a full sum, but is that psychotherapy. If you really, really, and that's why it connects to most people, because you're going so deep that it actually connects to the archetypes of humanity. Not to get too, but so tell me about the psychotherapy that you're going through in this journey of writing each of these characters, Lenny, Alice. To me, that's like, it's the most beautiful aspect of your work.
Oh, thank you. I learn so much as a human being with each book that I write. And I do like that, those common, I say I write on the surface, I write about neurological conditions, and you will learn a lot about the truth of what those diseases and conditions are, how they're diagnosed, how they're treated, what happens in the brain. I try to sneak that in a poetic way. But I'm also always writing about our shared human condition.
Yeah.
So I learn a lot about myself. And I feel like I become a better person with each book I write if I'm paying attention, and I am paying attention. So like with Alice, it was listening to folks talk about being diagnosed and living with Alzheimer's. I think that even with my experience with my grandmother, I think that my preconceived notion of the disease was, again, because it makes me, at the time, it doesn't anymore, but it made me so uncomfortable that I would leave the situation really quickly, and that feels better. Now I'm not looking at Alzheimer's, right? So I think that it helped me imagine what living with Alzheimer's looks and sounds and feels like, whereas before my preconceived notion was Alzheimer's is a disease of the dying elderly.
Yeah.
Like Alzheimer's is dying. But what does living look like? Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. So it was about really the learned lessons in that book were understanding that we are all worthy of living while we're living, that people with Alzheimer's or people with anything have value, and that if there's a disability or if there's a deficit, if there's something missing, and Alzheimer's say it's memory, I can't remember what you said 5 minutes ago, that can be okay. I have a very good friend, his name is Greg O'Brien. He has Alzheimer's. He's had it since he was 59. He has early onset. He has 2 copies of ApoE4. And he's one of my dearest friends. Yeah. And he forgets what he's saying in conversation with me all through the conversation, and that's okay.
Yeah.
If you can be comfortable with someone, right? If you can relax and be with and have compassion and empathy. Greg's just forgotten what I told him. That's okay. There's so much more to Greg than his ability to remember. So that book taught me a lot about having just more flexibility and forgiveness with all of our imperfections and all of our flaws or inability to do certain things. But the other books too, it's like I learned about unconditional love and forgiveness and it's just our shared humanity with every book.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Beautiful.
But I mean, it's one of the things that comes out of this your many books is just that, which is the ability to connect humanity in totality. I mean, we've traveled quite a bit. We actually met many miles away in a conversation in a third world country where we went back to help out. And in retrospect, it's the same vulnerability. The same vulnerability that, or sense of comfort with that vulnerability. The greater the discomfort with certain vulnerability, there's something in ourselves that makes us dissonant to that. And so that's why one of the things that we tell our kids is, if there's something making you uncomfortable, take a few minutes to figure out what that could be. It's not about that thing. It might be about you. It might be about something in you, which is beautiful. And this, so your latest book, in 2021, I believe, right?
Yes, in May. Yeah.
May.
Remember.
Yeah, I remember. So tell me how that book is different from the others. Yeah, because I guarantee you, every book is a growing, as you said, it's a growth process. But what was the growing in this book?
Yeah. And just really quickly too, because you mentioned the word vulnerability, which is so perfect. It's that's one of the biggest things every book teaches me too, because the people who are willing to share their time with me, you know, we all only have so much time on this planet. We're all mortal, right? But we tend to sort of push that aside and forget that we are. But people diagnosed with something like ALS or Huntington's or Alzheimer's, their mortality really is front and center. And with only so much time left, they're willing to raise their hand and say, I'll spend some of that time with you, Lisa, and share with you, you know, my biggest fears, my regrets, my hopes, all of this very, very intimate, vulnerable, personal stuff. And it is, what it teaches me, it's so humbling. It's such an enormous act of generosity. But we get to know each other extremely well. The relationship that I form with people and doing the research for my books becomes very intimate. And it's a lesson in, wouldn't it be wonderful if all of our relationships could be intimate and vulnerable like that open-hearted, open-souled, like I'm going to share me with you and you're going to do the same. I think so much of our day-to-day conversations are, how are you? Oh, I'm good. How are you? Good. So that's a lesson I learned with all of my books, is that when it's safe to, if you can really share yourself with someone, that vulnerability is the human connection we all really desire. But this book, Remember, that I wrote, I wasn't, I'm a novelist at this point. So I wrote this nonfiction book because I was finding that in all the years that I've been using Still Alice as a vehicle for conversation about Alzheimer's, I was finding that wherever I gave a talk anywhere in the world about Alzheimer's, people would wait for me at the end of the book signing line, or the women would follow me into the ladies' room and they would pepper me with questions about the moments of forgetting they were experiencing. And these tended to be people over the age of 40, mostly 50s and 60s and beyond. And they would say to me, okay, so I'm always forgetting people's names. And if I don't write down everything I need to do on a to-do list, I won't remember to do it. And every day I walk into the kitchen and I don't know why I'm in there. So does this mean I'm getting Alzheimer's? And the examples they were bringing to me were pretty much these over and over again. Oh, I'm always forgetting where I put my phone or my keys or my glasses. That must mean I'm getting Alzheimer's. And so in every single one of these conversations, I could say, well, no, all of the examples you've given me are moments of normal forgetting because you own a normal human brain.
Yeah.
Our human brains are not designed to remember everything. And there was this expectation that human memory is supposed to be perfect. And so when it's not, people were assuming, especially after a certain age when Alzheimer's is on people's radars, oh my God, this must mean there's something wrong with my brain. There must be something wrong with my memory. And then there's this chronic stress response and anxiety that people are carrying every day. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have to maybe write this down so I'm not just helping one person at a time in the ladies' room. So that was the reason behind Remember. It's like, okay, let me see if I can, and I'd be really gentle here because people find it overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like people find, you're going to teach me about the brain. This is what the two of you do so well too, by the way, is that you really are so conversational and so human and gentle about, let me explain to you how this works. So I thought, I want to write a book that feels like a fun and gentle conversation with a good friend about how memory works, how we remember, why we forget. And she just happens to be a neuroscientist, so you're going to get the real deal. So yeah, I just wanted people to like have the owner's manual. Like, this is how memory works. Yeah. This is what we can, this is how to improve it and optimize it. But that wasn't really the focus of this book. But like, here's how memory works and the things that it loves. So if you want to remember better, if you want to study for a test, or if you want to remember what happened last year, like, here are the things that memory needs to remember things better. Here's how to support the health of your memory and your brain, which, again, the two of you are geniuses at communicating. But I have that in there as well. But my biggest contribution, I think, in this book was showing people why forgetting is, under what circumstances is forgetting totally normal. Yeah. So you can either just go, I'm not going to worry about it because that happens, or how to, navigate around it so that it doesn't disrupt your life, so that you can find your parked car, so that you can figure out why you walked into the kitchen. But know that the reason you can't pull it up in this moment is normal and not a cause for panic and freaking out.
It's so important because there are so many people out there basically waiting to build a empire, to build an industry, to build their wealth around this fear. Yeah.
Yes.
And they're hunting for these vulnerabilities. They're hunting for these fears. They actually create the fear so that then they can plunder it into exactly, and sell the remedy, and that's a huge problem because it's working on the most important, or it's degrading the most important thing that we have as humanity, this vulnerable being, which is hope. They play on people's hopes and they play on people's fears, which is the most cynical way to live. We see these scientists, they've done great work, and all of a sudden they've become this cynical pill pop pushers. And we're actually not against pills. In fact, on the other side, we're fighting all these people that are just throwing out baby with the bathwater. No, science works. Molecular science works. All of that, but also this. Yes. But these cynical people who are playing on people's hopes and fears, and you telling them that, no, this is normal part of aging. How often people come to us and say, nope, this is fine. There's a little bit of nervousness. This is, focus being the gatekeeper of consciousness, your focus being affected by fear, by anxiety, and so on and so forth. So I love that concept of kind of giving people the normality of just living imperfectly.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Our brains were not designed to remember everything. Right. They're not designed to remember people's names. They're not designed to remember what to do later. And they're not designed to catalog everything that we encounter. And then a lot of times we're not forgetting anything. We just didn't pay attention. Yeah. And you can't remember anything unless you neurologically give your brain your attention on that thing. So, and to your point, it's, everybody wants the magic pill, and Alzheimer's is scary. Growing old is, there's a lot that can happen that's scary, and I get that. And people would love the magic pill. Yeah. And those folks out there who are claiming to have the magic pill that will, this one pill will prevent Alzheimer's, or this one pill will, boost your memory. And it's, I tell people all the time, they're lying to you. Yeah. It's not true. If that were true, you would hear it, from all of the trusted people I know. And like, this is just, it's not the case. Or the fear that, bread is going to give you Alzheimer's. Like, that's not true. No. But there are people trying to scare you into taking their magic supplement. And so I try telling people all the time, it's like, there's no magic pill, but there are things that work as if they were magic pills. Yeah. So we know, and you guys post so much wonderful education regularly on the data behind exercise and Mediterranean or mind diet, sleep, all of the things that aren't, super sexy and do require a little bit of effort on our part. But the data are amazing. And that if I told you that a pill did what 30 minutes of exercise a day could do, or what 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night could do, you would take that pill and probably pay a lot of money for it too.
Or the most unsexy of them all, greens, eating greens, just a salad. Yeah. I mean, how you can't create an industry around a salad. Well, you could potentially, but
you could.
It doesn't go far. Yeah.
Right. No, I so appreciate the fact that you weave in evidence, which, we're very, 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 very passionate about. You weave in evidence-based information with storytelling as well. So I really appreciate that. And in many ways, I think we're both fighting this misconception and, forcing people to make sure that they don't get duped by all the charlatans out there. And I'm usually a very nice person, but I can become really mean and rude when I'm faced with people like that, because how it is when vulnerable individuals are taken advantage of at that stage.
It's so upsetting because people will spend thousands of dollars of money they might not really have to try and save their brains, and they're being sold something that's untrue. So it is upsetting. Those people are dangerous. I thank you for calling them out.
No, thank you. Dina, and I know that, in addition to being a phenomenal novelist, you're also a public speaker, you're an advocate, you've actually collaborated with multiple different organizations that are doing Alzheimer's research. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in those areas?
Yeah, sure. So I do a lot of speaking. I've done a couple of TED Talks. I have a TED course on your brain and memory. And I do a lot of work with the women's Alzheimer's movement with Maria Shriver, trying to understand. So women are twice as likely as men to develop Alzheimer's. Long while back, we thought, well, age is the number one risk factor. Maybe it's just because women outlive men and there are more 85-year-old women than 85-year-old men. That is not the case. There's something else going on. Historically, we only studied male brains. So Maria, if you know Maria at all, she's like, what? We're not studying female brains. This is wrong, and I will correct this.
Yeah.
So she is devoting a large part of her time and energy and force of goodness in the world to rectifying that and raising money and putting money into understanding women's brains and Alzheimer's in women's brains. I love Hilarity for Charity. That is Seth and Lauren Rogen's organization that is about educating, especially young people, because they say, oh, this is a disease that takes maybe 20 years to develop in a brain. Yeah. Well, we should be teaching young people about brain health and making brain health sexy and fun and cool. So they're doing tons of education, especially with the younger generations. And also giving money to caregivers, because Lauren's mom had early onset Alzheimer's, and they have the money to pay for caregiving, but recognize that what if we didn't? How on earth would we do this? And so they know that there are millions of people out there who don't have the money to hire outside help, and therefore are juggling maybe you're still raising kids of your own, and a parent has Alzheimer's, and you have a full-time job. And so how does that even work? So they're giving money to help people with caregiving, which is just a very generous, beautiful thing, mission. Who else? The Cure Alzheimer's Fund here in Boston that funds, they are acting sort of like a venture capital company where they're like, we're going to invest in high-risk but smart research that would take way too long and too much red tape to get a government grant, and we're just going to fund you. And they dump in the philanthropist who started this organization pays for all of the administrative costs, so all of the money donated goes directly to research. Which is pretty cool. So I do a lot for those folks too.
Amazing,
remarkable.
That's incredible.
Well, we focus on our not-for-profit Healthy Minds Initiative. We focus on the community side. So translation of what has been shown, but in a way that actually sticks to the unique natures of each community. My PhD thesis was around this translational aspect of things, community-based participatory research and community-based participatory action. And we've actually focused on the disparities populations. By the way, the biggest one is women. And by the way, the best place to invest in any healthcare, and this is my public health background, international, is in women, because a dollar spent in women is 4 times more effective than anywhere else, even in molecular research anywhere. So when you empower women in a community, you've empowered the entire community exponentially. So it's just remarkable work that you do. And I think what's happening, because just 1990s, we didn't know much about Alzheimer's, and then President Reagan, and he came out, and that actually brought up some awareness. And then there was a whole lot of confusion because everybody was focused on the amyloid thesis, which is not wrong, but it's not the total story. And it just took all of the air, all of the oxygen. And now it needed people to kind of open up the venue into a more complex approach. Like you said, researcher women, researcher communities, to the young people. That's where it starts, even as young as high school and college students. You working on these things. Are you also kind of focusing on a specific, do you have a particular specific area? If there's anybody who knows the whole spectrum, it's you by now. From the science to the human condition, is there a particular place that you think is the highest yield if people had to focus on?
Oh, in terms of like, if you have $1 to give, where would you put it? That's hard. I think, no, I don't. I think it depends on what feels good to you, right? So I like, honestly, the three I just said. So one is like, let's put our money into women and women's brains. I'm a woman, I'm a feminist. I feel like that's like just really important and will probably yield some amazing results and outcomes. I love that. I don't ever want to abandon the people living with it today. So I love the Seth and Lauren Rogan organization that they're focusing on. Like, yeah, we want a cure, but that might not happen right now or in 5 years or 10 years or whenever. It's like, well, what about the people who have it now? Let's not abandon and ignore them.
Yeah.
And then I would love to see a preventative medicine for Alzheimer's in my lifetime. And so let's fund smart research. So it just depends on, what lights you up, right? So certain people will be jazzed about donating for caregiving. They're like, no, I want the cure. I got to donate to the cure. Other people especially people who've lived this, know that the human experience with Alzheimer's can be really, really hard and can be financially devastating. It can be, families can go bankrupt over this. So that might be where they want to make a difference and contribute.
Absolutely. No, I love that, I love that we have the opportunity. We're in a time where we can see the multifaceted picture of dementia and Alzheimer's disease and get involved in it. I have a question about your books being translated into movies. So, a lot of them have been movies and, television shows. I watched Still Alice. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. What did the process look like? And did you actually have a say in what the movie or the adaptation would actually look like on TV?
So we've only done the one, Still Alice. I have many in development, and each one is different. So with Still Alice, I had no say, and I very willingly gave up all control and had no problem with that because I recognize that I'm not a filmmaker. So why would I be in charge of any of this when I've never seen it or done it before? So I placed my trust in the producers and the directors. The directors also co-wrote the script. They were wonderful and generous in involving me when they didn't have to. So they sent me various drafts of the script and asked for input, and some of it they took and some of it they didn't. It's a fascinating process to watch. I mean, the man who optioned the film rights, James Brown, he's a producer, he read the book on a flight from Australia to London, and by the time he landed, he knew he wanted to make this film, and there was a specific scene in the book that really lit him up, and he could imagine it on the screen. He said, that was the scene when I knew that this was going to be a movie. That scene was never written into the script.
Oh,
I know.
Wow.
And then of what they filmed, some of those scenes didn't make it into the movie because in the editing process, they moved some scenes around, and then certain scenes didn't make sense anymore, and they had to drop out.
Yeah.
So it was a lesson in non-attachment. So And it was also a lesson in like big picture perspective, right? It was, and I had that. It was, as long as they do a good job and it's in service of telling the story with dignity and respect, right? If the story gets made and it's done well enough that people see it, that's the point. I want, the world to be able to see this story about a woman with Alzheimer's. And so the details didn't matter if they got lost in translation. And it was surreal to watch them do it. I was on set. And I got to go, I was at the Oscars. I got to go to a lot of the festivals along the way, and it was trippy. The morning of the Oscars, I was standing in line in Starbucks, and I'm just thinking about my Nana, who it's all started with her. Tears rolling down my face. I can hear the sound of her laugh. Just like, can you believe this, Nana? Like, look what just happened. Yeah, and so we're doing Every Note Played. I can't give you the details, and I would love to, but it's like, I keep checking my email, like, can we say? We're going to be filming this fall in New York. And yes, so that's the one about the concert pianist with ALS. And I can announce the cast soon, so check my Instagram.
Can you tell us the cast? Okay.
I would love to, but I can't. And then Inside the O'Briens, that one's had a very long journey. We had Russell Crowe a couple of times. He dropped out. We had a director who rewrote the original script, and we had Toni Collette and Thomas Hayden Church and Haley Richardson, and the director left, and then we had no director, and then it all fell apart. And then a little over a year ago, I had an idea, a way of rewriting the script, and my agent and the producer loved it, and then I said, well, how about if I write it? And they said yes. And then I tried to back out because I'm like, well, I don't know how to write a script. I've not done that. But I ended up doing it. It took me about a year. I wrote the script for Inside the O'Briens. Oh, wow. And we're right now trying to get our director. And then Left Neglected has also been optioned, and they're writing the script right now. So
that's incredible.
Hopefully all of these will happen.
No. And are you being pulled? Because I know psychologically or intellectually, you're also intrigued by this whole process. I mean, imagine a neuroscientist who went into fiction writing. I mean, and you said that was such a growing experience, such a amazing growth. So are you thinking about directing some of these as well, or having some part in directing?
No, I don't know nearly enough. That's not even something I can imagine at this point. I'm not saying I wouldn't someday. I think that I'll write more for film and TV, though.
Yeah.
I'm finishing a book right now about a young woman with bipolar disorder. And I'm hoping that one will get optioned pretty quickly. And then the producer, it's James Brown again, who I wrote Inside the O'Briens for the script. He's optioned that. He's asked me to write another movie. I think it's intended to be a comedy. Well, yes, it's about a group of menopausal women in a clinical trial support group for a menopause drug.
Cool. Oh, wow.
That's going to be
a departure for me, but I'm 52 and feel like that's something I could be down with. So I'm going to try it. So I'm going to say yes to that next adventure. So I'll be writing.
I think writing comedy is got to be one of the most difficult things. Not to, but it's because comedy is so intelligent. So I mean, good comedy.
Yes. And so, ready to your point, the book I'm writing now about the woman with bipolar disorder, she is an aspiring stand-up comic. That's the character I decided on. Yeah. And so I did a lot of research on comedy for this book, and I took a stand-up writing comedy class, and I did a 5-minute set. So it's very hard, and I have to write a lot of her comedy in this book, and it's different, and I like it. It's hard in a fun, challenging way.
Well, stand-up, talk about vulnerability and stillness. Talk about vulnerability and stillness. I think there's nothing more. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. So like every book I write, I learn about the disease, the condition, and I also have to learn about the character and the story. So I take those as opportunities. So like in Inside the O'Briens, Katie O'Brien, one of the two main characters. She's a yoga teacher. So I did a 200-hour yoga teacher training to learn about her. And I took piano lessons when I was writing about the concert pianist.
Wow.
And so this is just, I get to be a lifelong student with these projects, which is really fun.
It's gorgeous.
Well,
It's
the complexity definitely comes through in your words and the way you describe situation.
Thank you. Which is good for our brains, right? We get to learn new things, and this is good for our brains developing new neural connections, giving us cognitive reserve.
If there's anything, it's that. Absolutely. It's beautiful.
Oh, so what advice would you give to aspiring writers, someone who wants to go in this journey? I mean, you've had such an amazing experience because you deal with the real life situation. You're a scientist, so you know exactly what goes on in the brain, and then you translate it so beautifully. If someone wants to become a writer, a novelist, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think I was lucky because I didn't know what I didn't know. I think that a lot of writers, there's a lot of fear in the way. And it's what if it's, what if I can't finish it? Or what if it's not good? Or what if it never gets published? Or what if I can't make a career out of it? And it's just give yourself permission to write today.
Yeah.
And so for me, like while I'm writing, when the research is done or mostly done and I'm actually sitting down to write today, which I am, I commit to writing 1,000 words.
Right.
And so it's the permission to write horrible words. It's, you sit down and get the words down because you can edit something, you can't edit nothing.
Yeah.
And that I tell young people all the time, we're like, oh, I don't know. Or even older people who want to write, oh, I don't know if maybe later, maybe someday. I say, you're going to be dead someday. Do it now.
Yeah.
If you really want to do it, giving yourself permission to do it, I think is one of the biggest things. And then do your homework, right? Like, so, if you don't know how to write dialogue, get a book on writing how to write dialogue or take a class. But you don't need an MFA. You don't need these things. I don't have it. Go take an acting class. Great. The best writing class I ever took was acting. But sit down and do it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's a beautiful lesson for life too. Sometimes we overwhelm ourselves with the complexity of the work at hand, and we just kind of create this narrative that dissuades us from jumping in and doing it.
Yes, and so I can't write 300 pages today. That's overwhelming. Oh my God, I can't write. People say, oh, I can't write a whole novel. I don't have time. It's like, well, can you write 2 pages today? Can you write a page today?
Right.
Well, if you wrote a page every day, you'd be done in a year.
Yeah.
So just manageable. We can do small things every day, and they add up.
Absolutely.
That was our parenting conversation with our kids last night.
Yes.
That's
the false perfection, false grandeur of the moment. It's always small steps, and courage is that one step. Courage is not the big journey; it's the one step. And it's such a beautiful thing. I tell you, I'm not at the cost of sounding like, giving you false flattery.
It's okay. We'll talk to her. We're so inspired.
We've had hundreds of conversations. This was very important to us because I think you represent what we think is extremely important. Somebody that can translate honestly and importantly, as vulnerably and in a way that can connect to the most people what needs to be translated of science, which is the human component. That's it. That's the most important thing we can do. And you do it better than anybody we know. I mean, that's why it was so important. Maybe we don't know a lot of people, Lisa. So that was my attempt at comedy. Yeah, we do know a lot of people. We know a lot of people. But and so I really think that your work is so important, and we love to see the next project. We're going to be connected with you, for a long time.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm huge fans of both of you. Your work, same. Your work is so important. I cheer you on from home. I applaud all that you're doing to educate the public in such a very truthful, fact-based, compassionate, conversational way. Yeah, like we feel like we know you, we trust you, and it's real. So I thank you both so much. I think you're beautiful humans. And yes, when I'm in LA next, I'm finding you.
Oh my gosh, that's
And if there's a bad actor you need from any of your movies, I'm volunteering.
I could be a backup actor.
Yeah, that's right.
I really love being in that.
Yeah.
All right, here's to more conversations in the future. Hopefully, Lisa, thank you for everything you do, and we love you.
I love you too.